This is a Ben Frank Connection presentation.
Hey.
All right. What's going on?
What's up?
Hey, glad to see you could join us today.
Yep.
I'm Ralph.
Welcome.
I'm your host, and this is Parmesan, my co-host and tag team partner. Sean,
Boom.
how's everything going?
How's it going? Back for another lovely episode of Wrestling with Life. If you're watching us on Patreon, happy Monday. If you're watching us on YouTube, happy Friday.
Yeah, and as Sean mentioned there, if you are a Patreon, you get this 5 days early. And if you're not a Patreon, we've got some other great stuff for you.
Always.
Over on Patreon, so head on over. Join our Patreon, get some cool stuff, and get to see all the Wrestling with Life episodes early.
Indeed.
Including this episode, which, Sean, we've got a great guest today. I'm very excited about this one.
I'm super excited for this one. I didn't even know that this was a thing, and the fact that it is baffling to me.
It is very cool.
The creator, chief editor, and main content creator of the WrestleMap website. Let's bring in Bryan Anderson. Hey, what's going on, man? How are you?
How's it going, guys? I'm good. How about you?
Super happy you could be on the show this week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Super excited.
So let's kind of start at the beginning here. Now, we kind of stumbled onto WrestleMaps. We talked a little bit about this off the air with you, but good friend of the show, Jim Murray, professional wrestling ring announcer, world traveler. Recently did a video for WrestleMaps from Bash at the Bay 3 over in China, and that kind of really turned us on to this whole phenomenon of WrestleMaps. So let's kind of start at the beginning and find out how this kind of all came about.
So I guess, generally speaking, WrestleMap, the whole idea that I originally had was I wanted to create a spot that I could, for myself, keep track of like wrestling all around the world.
Right.
So I had this idea during COVID that like I wanted to compile this stuff because I'd always been, I've been a wrestling fan for a long time, and I'd always been really curious about like wrestling in other places, like wrestling in Africa was always something really interesting to me, and I'd come across it here and there, and it would be like, there's got to be, someone, covering this more, or like keeping track of this more. And I was never able to find anything, so I started during COVID kind of as like a hobby that I wanted to put together a map and have the map just kind of represent, wrestling all over the world. I could take a look, whenever I wanted, check in on these places.
Right.
I was actually doing like comedy, like stand-up comedy before COVID. Okay. And then when COVID started up, it was like, I can't really go do comedy anymore because everything's shut down. So it took me a while, and I'd always wanted to be involved in wrestling in some way.
Right.
I'd done like some ring announcing and some play-by-play for like local indies here and there, just a couple times, nothing like permanent. So I had this idea. I wanted to launch this website, but I wanted to see like if anyone was interested, really. So I started to build the map, was the first thing I did, and I went to Reddit, and I went on Squared Circle, and I kind of just shared like, hey, I'm building this map, thinking about launching a website. What do you guys think? And like the reaction was really cool, and I heard from people like all around the world, like, hey, make sure you include this from like, I don't know, Dubai or whatever. And I was like, whoa, this is like crazy. Yeah. So I went forward with it, and I launched the WrestleMap website, WrestleMap.com, with the idea that it was just going to serve as like a map for pro wrestling. And I thought, it could be a useful tool for wrestlers that wanted to tour like internationally. Right. For like promoters that they could like, all around the world, like now their stuff is all in one place. People
Right.
could kind of, come together and find it. And then like for fans like me that were just kind of like curious about, wrestling in other places. So from there, things just kind of grew a little bit. We added like news. I've made some relationships with a friend in Nigeria who really convinced me to launch like a news section that he actually contributes to as well. I didn't realize, like, I'd never had this intention of being like a news site or anything, but then I kind of launched into that, and now we're doing a lot more like video with like events, and even like you mentioned for the Bash at the Bay stuff from MKW in China, like behind the scene vlogs, and just really trying to find, I guess, really anything international wrestling that people might be interested in, and helping to try and spread it around.
Yeah. How did you manage to like gather and collect all of like the information? Because there's so much wrestling out there. Like, how did you find and start creating this map? Like, did you have help from like other promoters, or like did you just do the research yourself?
It was mostly a lot of research that I started just on my own. But then when I reached out on Reddit, I had a lot of people that came through with, hey, don't forget us in this part of the world and whatever. And so there was a lot of submissions too on top of it, but it has been a ton of research. So I have kind of like a spreadsheet that I work off of, where it's like just a list of every country in the world, and I try to do as much research as I can to try and track down something there if there is.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Have you found, being that this is completely, like international all over the world, have you found that there has been any maybe language barriers in some areas where, like, deciphering information or contacting people or talking to people, and how do you handle that?
For sure. Google Translate has become one of my best friends.
Right. Yeah.
It's not always right on, obviously, so there will be some situations where, I'm not necessarily getting back the information that I was hoping for.
Right.
But I try to be persistent, and I actually have made a lot of friends, like, just through the internet, like wrestling in, some of the craziest places that you'd imagine, like the Congo in Africa. Like I have like a handful of friends there now that like I'll talk to for like information, and they'll send me stuff and, photos, videos, all sorts of stuff. And so, but yeah, I mean, I definitely still run into some, language barriers and that kind of thing here and there for sure.
Yeah. It looks like WrestleMap's also received some like awards of some kind. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know there was one from the Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation, and there was one as well from I'm probably gonna butcher this, but Review du Catch Belge d'Afrique. Is that even close?
Maybe Afrique. That's in French. Which,
I tried.
Like I said, I don't know it. I only know what Google Translate tells me.
Right.
So, yeah, there's been a few cool like awards that I've received. Like you mentioned, Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation. They presented me with like a certificate at one of their events. The Review, like from Belgium, they've given me a couple with like best international wrestling coverage, that kind of thing.
That's awesome.
There's two more that I'm like super proud of. They both came from Pro Wrestling Africa.
Nice.
And I actually received, like, there's a plaque. I wish I would have brought it up. I could have showed you guys, but it's definitely on my social media, because I'm like, usually I'm like, I feel like, oh, I don't deserve this or whatever, that kind of thing. But this time, this was like the first time I was like, whoa, I'm like really proud of this thing.
Right,
like I would love to like show this off. So it was it's like this great plaque, and it's got a picture of me on it, and it was for like helping to spread the like pro wrestling in Africa around the world, and
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was presented at an event in Yaoundé, Cameroon, for Pro Wrestling Africa. The only other non-wrestler that won an award from PWA at that event was actually the president of Cameroon.
Oh, wow.
So I was like blown away by that.
That's crazy.
And then, yeah, and I actually recently got it because, like the actual physical plaque, because there was a wrestler, he's based out of Florida, the Golden Boy, Jimmy McDowell is his name. He went and wrestled in Cameroon over the summer this year, and he became, as far as I've been able to find, the first American to wrestle in Cameroon. And we worked out that he would take the plaque home with him and then mail it to me, and so it finally arrived. And I actually got a bunch of really cool like show posters and stuff from Nigeria along with it too.
Right.
So like those two, like getting all that together was just like really awesome. Like
That's really
so,
cool.
like the coolest, like I try to collect like wrestling like books and some memorabilia and posters, and like that stuff, like the African stuff is the coolest to me because like I don't think really anyone else has that. So
the actual name of it was the International Royal Award for Pro Wrestling Excellence.
Yes,
that just sounds like an esteemed award.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
I know,
absolutely.
I know. I was like telling my friends, you know, that don't know anything about wrestling, like they're just like, because you know, like I mentioned, I do comedy and stuff. So like, so this is a joke, right? You're getting an award from Africa. That's a joke, right? And I was like, actually, no. Like,
Wow.
No, this is the real thing, guys.
Yeah.
So, obviously you mentioned, you know, comedy and, you know, WrestleMaps is obviously not your full-time job, but, you know, how much of a job is running WrestleMap? You mentioned that, you know, you do a lot of the content, you know, a lot of the research and everything is all you. So, you know, what kind of a time, you know, crunch is this? Like, I'm sure quite a bit of time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I do put a lot of time in. And I think, too, it ebbs and flows. So, like, some days I'm like, man, I don't feel like doing this today. And other days it's like, I don't know, I'll go to work, try to sneak in some of it at work, try to, you know, then when I get home, when I get home, you know, pull up the laptop and go for, like, you know, 4 or 5 hours and then go to bed. So, yeah, it is it's definitely time consuming, especially with like research and things like that. Yeah.
So like what's the method? Like how do you start? Like do you start like by state, by country? Like is there like a method to the madness?
Yeah, the list that I put together, like I found just like some country list online. It lists, you know, everything, all the countries and like territories and all that, and it's alphabetical. So for my own like personal research that I'm doing, that's not like submitted from some of the users and stuff like that, that's been just kind of like moved down the alphabetical list. And I'm still not fully through it, but I've at this point I feel like I've done pretty well, like with a lot of international stuff. The U.S., I think I still have a ton of work to do. Like there's a lot there, but I still think I have
in the US.
a ton more that I still have to add. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I do hear a lot, like I'll get, because I have like a link on the website for like if you want to submit your promotion. And I do hear a lot from U.S. promotions too. So I think it's getting kind of like out there now, like maybe showing up on Google and stuff. And so I'm getting more people reaching out, which is definitely really helpful.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier for me to not have to do as much research if someone's like, you know, here's our link. So that's always super helpful. Yeah.
So has this made you want to travel more now? Because I know, like, if I'm doing all this research, I'm thinking to myself, man, I want to go see this, I want to go see this, and
oh, for sure,
it kind of sparked the travel bug.
Yeah, for sure, and I do like to travel. So Like I have this crazy goal that I'll never meet because it's just impossible. But it's
Oh,
like,
don't say that.
well, it's like I'd like to see a show in like every country on the map, but I don't think that's ever.
I mean,
I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
You can try.
Like, yeah, I can try, but it's like I can try, but it's like, one, I don't have the money for that.
Right,
Two, like I don't have the time at work.
Yeah.
Three, I like, you know, just I don't know. There's just all sorts. So I don't know. Hopefully, I mean, there's been I have talked with like some of like the promoters and stuff, and actually, I think it was yesterday, one of the promotions in Pakistan. He's like, we really want to have you out for a show. He's like, you know, we'll cover it. I was like, no, I can't let you guys cover that. He's like, well, we'll talk to our sponsors. So I don't know how that's gonna go, but yeah, I don't know. And like my friend in Nigeria that works on the site as well, and contributes some news. He's always talked about, you know, we want to have you out for something out here. So I don't know. It would be awesome. I'd love to, but I just don't know how it'll ever line up. And we'll see. We'll see.
So why don't we wind the clocks back and kind of tell us how you got into the wrestling? Like, what got you hooked? What got you into it?
Yeah.
Where'd you start?
Yeah, so I think my dad was into wrestling some when I was growing up. Maybe even like my grandparents too. I remember I was probably like, I think I was like 3 years. Getting a phone
There you
call.
go.
Sorry.
You're back.
Hey,
We're good.
we're back.
All good.
So I remember being like 3 years old. And the very first thing I remember is kind of like the Hogan and Andre feud, and like the build for like WrestleMania 3 and all that. And I remember like my dad ordering some WrestleManias really early on when I was really young. Like I remember seeing, you know, Warrior Hogan and you know the tournament where like
the title,
the vacant title, so that's kind of where I got started. And it just kind of grew from there, especially growing up. You know, my first thing I ever wanted to be was a pro wrestler.
Oh, yeah?
And, you know, I got really into, you know, WCW, ECW as I got older. Then, like, after ECW and WCW closed, I kind of, like, took a little break. And I didn't watch for a little bit. And then I got more back into it, and, like, I don't know, about 10 years later, 2010s is when I started back up again. So I took kind of a break. Like I would follow it because it was like such a big important part of my life for so long. Like I would check in and like see what's up on the internet, but I wasn't like actively watching shows or anything like that. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Did you have a favorite growing up, and do you have a favorite wrestler now?
Growing up at different stages, I had different favorites. Like I mentioned Hogan, like as like the first thing I was watching. He was definitely the favorite back then. Like probably during like the Monday Night Wars, I would say I was a huge Raven fan for some reason. I loved Raven.
Good pick. Good pick.
Yeah.
But WCW Raven was amazing.
Oh yeah. He was great. He was
absolutely.
Funny story. I actually like at that point, I think I was in 6th grade when like the height of my Raven fandom was going. I started my own flock at school.
Nice.
Right? And
I
was Raven, and like I had my other friends. I'd be like, okay, you're Saturn, you're whatever. We actually. There was like a group in the class next door. They decided they're the Wolf Pack. We got into like a scuffle one day in the staircase. You know, kind of like a wrestling scuffle. So like we weren't really beating each other. But then they called me into the office to talk to me about gang violence.
Oh no!
And told me I had to like break up the flock and all sorts of stuff like that.
Jesus.
That's tremendous.
I had something similar, but not as extreme. When I was in like 8th grade, like high school, me and my buddies were DX, and we would just go around filming each other doing stupid DX things.
Nice.
But it was never to the point of like. But it was never to that point. It was never to that point.
It definitely took me by surprise. Yeah. Oh,
we used to have wrestling matches during pay-per-views, and we would set up like the couches and the chairs around to like make the ring, and
Right.
Yeah.
we'd make our own factions, and we had this faction. It was the New World of Domination. We kind of put the
Nice.
Nation of Domination together, and we had these shirts made up. And so like we had these two guys that were wrestling, and I was the referee, and I cheated for the one guy.
Nice.
And because he had an NWOD shirt on. So after I cheated for him, I tore open my shirt and I had one on.
Nice.
And then all of a sudden, like 10 people in the room just started taking shirts off. They all had NWOD shirts.
Yes.
And
That's
there was
awesome.
there was like one guy standing in the middle that didn't have one. It's
That's
crazy the things you
awesome.
do when you're a kid.
That's
Like you're
amazing.
I remember vividly. I was sitting next to this kid, and we were watching the TV, and Goldust comes out,
Right.
and he yells to the kid in the kitchen. He's like, "Yo, look, your dad's on TV." And this kid, I have never seen anybody run so fast in my life. He started running from the kitchen, and as he got about 5 feet away, he dove through the air, and it looked like Michael Jordan going for a slam dunk. He's flying through the air with a fist right into this kid's face.
Jesus.
Like the stuff you do as a kid is so
Yeah.
ridiculous,
Oh yeah.
especially when it comes to wrestling.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
yeah.
Childhood
dude.
memories.
Wrestling was,
Yeah.
dude. They always say, "Don't try this at home," right? I'm pretty sure all of us at
Every
least
kid-
once
Oh,
we
we
tried
did.
it at home.
Are you kidding?
I was a yarder. I was in backyard
Yeah.
wrestling for sure.
Yeah.
We had our
So was
own
Ralph.
promotion.
That was
and-
the same thing.
Yep, we had one in my yard and then a second one at my friend's house. Yeah,
There
it was
you go.
crazy. You did some crazy stuff.
Yeah, those were the days.
Was
Yep.
yours in your friend's backyard, Ralph?
No, mine was actually in my backyard.
Oh, there you go.
and We went all out. Like we had these we had a 2-car parking garage, and there were these gates that opened, and I took the gates off, and I set the gates up like diagonally on the porch to make this entrance, and I hung stuff on them, and we filled the yard with mattresses. And I had people like we had this little little covered patio outside, and I had people diving off the patio and jumping. It was the most
Yeah.
ridiculous
Yeah.
thing.
That's awesome.
How none of us got seriously injured, I don't know.
Right?
Because we're
Did
out there.
everyone
But
have their own theme song and everything? And like you had speakers and you
Oh
played
yeah,
your own theme song and
we
everything?
had people on commentary. We took
Yes.
video.
Yep.
Like it was insane. But
Love
I
it.
will say though, not too far from me, about maybe 15 minutes from where I lived, a certain professional wrestler grew up in a backyard federation there, none other than Tony Deppen.
Right.
And he was a backyard, so he was right down the road from me. And I used to go see some of their matches, but definitely not safe. I'm not advocating anybody be a backyarder, because
Right.
it ends up one of two. It ends up like one of two ways. Like you either become a professional wrestler, or like something bad happens, and that's
Yeah.
when you quit.
Yep.
There's never an in between. It's either one or the other.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
either you're a
right.
wrestler
There's
or
no
something
good
terrible happened and you just got to end it.
Yep.
So, kind of getting back into wrestling now.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff do you watch now? Are you do you follow a lot of wrestling? I mean, because we always talk about how tough it is, because
Yeah.
there's like
Seriously.
so much out there. There's so much
Yeah.
content. But do you
Constant.
try to keep up with stuff now?
Yeah, for the most part, I usually watch Dynamite weekly. I'll
Yeah.
try to watch that weekly. WWE stuff, I don't watch every episode, but I'll tune in to some stuff like the pay-per-views here and there, or like Mondays, or when I have time. And then that's kind of like other than like checking some stuff out online here and there, those are the ones that like I'll regularly watch,
Right.
like, try to catch on TV.
Right.
And then like I try to catch like some international stuff too, to like at least feature something here and there, like on my website or online and stuff.
Right.
So I'll try to catch that, or at least try to keep up with what's going on in some of these
Right.
places and like around the world. So, but Dynamite is the one that's like weekly,
Yeah.
every
Right.
week. Yeah.
Yeah.
We always joke that you don't really even have to watch Raw or SmackDown, because on the actual PLE, half the show is just recap.
Yeah.
Right.
So you don't even need to watch it because they
Yeah.
tell you what happens.
Right.
So
Yeah. And a lot of it, like a lot of stuff ends up on social media now too.
Yeah, that too.
Like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can catch
Yeah.
like clips on even just on Twitter that people like post like as the show's going on, or even like the accounts will post themselves. So yeah, I feel like you still catch it all for the most part without watching the full show.
Well, because I said this before, and I will stand by it. 3 hours is too long for a regular wrestling show. Like they need to strongly when they go to Netflix. I think they should strongly consider going back to 2 hours when they go to Netflix next year, because 3 hours is just a long show, and half of it, maybe an hour of it, is just ads. So like, it's just so long to watch one show.
It really is. And I have heard that Triple H's like dream is to go back to 2 hours for Raw. I don't know how true that is, but like I've read that a few times, and I'm sure it's not up to him, especially at this point now with like TKO owning everything. Right. So
it honestly wouldn't surprise me, because like some Raws you watch and a lot of it feels like filler because they have to fill the 3 hour time slot, whereas you watch the 2 hour version and the 2 hour version feels so smooth and it's over before it even starts. Raw, you're like, oh, it's only 9 o'clock. I have 2 hours left. You're like,
I know,
Jesus.
Yeah.
Going back to WrestleMaps, when did you get the idea for WrestleMaps?
It was around like COVID, like I mentioned. So like after I started the map and saw that there was some interest, I think that's when I went with it. One of the things that really like I guess got me to this point was not just like seeking stuff out online and like finding clips here and there, maybe like on YouTube, but there was a documentary that I watched about like UK wrestling. I think it was called like Two Falls to a Finish, I think is what it was called, something like that. And at that point, like I didn't really know like the history or like how big it had been in the past there, and I was like, that was something where I was like, I would love to like know more of these stories, or even like maybe help tell some of them if this is happening like around the world. So that was like a big thing too, where like I mentioned, I didn't want to necessarily be a news site. Like I when I started WrestleMap, I did do some writing. Like I would do like an article, like a feature on some stuff here and there. And that was always something like telling some of those stories was something I did kind of have an interest in. So that like after, seeing that documentary, I think that kind of did something where it's like, okay, now I want to, find out more about this or help share more of this.
Right.
So you did mention that you try to, watch some of the international stuff. Have you found that it's easy to get international stuff now, or is it still kind of hard in our country to be able to, find places to watch a lot of the different international stuff?
Yeah, it all depends on the promotion and like where they're based and kind of like how tech savvy I guess they are. So like there is a solid amount of stuff that you can find just on YouTube. Like a lot of promotions will have their monthly show or however often they'll put it up on YouTube. So like those a lot of those are maybe like smaller indies around the world that are like they have enough of an audience that they're wanting to share and are able to enough with like their video creation skills and all that. So, I would say mostly like Europe and South America would be the biggest for those, and even like Southeast Asia. Like a lot of those you can find on YouTube. Some of the bigger international indies, like they're not necessarily tough to watch, but they'll be on more like they'll have their own like streaming network, or they'll be on like some of the bigger ones like IWTV or something like that. So like you can still catch them. You would just have to buy the subscription.
Right.
And then even like into Africa, some of that is it might be tough to find at first, but once you know what to look for, what to search for, it can become, especially like in the Congo, like it can be pretty easy to find a lot of Congolese wrestling if you want to.
So other than WrestleMaps, we know that you've also done a few podcasts as well. Can you talk about some of the podcasts that you did as well?
Yeah, I've done the Business of the Business a couple times. They're on PW Ponderings now,
Okay.
on their YouTube, with John Paz and Lavi Margolin, and I love that show. If you guys haven't checked it out, they're really good. They do a lot of like business side of wrestling stuff.
Right.
But I've been on there a couple times, so it's a great show. I like it. I did. There was like a Busted Open like affiliate podcast. They were called Busted Open Nation or something, but it wasn't like
I've heard of that. Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't the Busted Open hosts, but like their fan base, and then like they would like host their own show, but then they would like be able to bring in some of like the Busted Open guys here and there. So I did a couple things with them, and it was actually pretty crazy. The one I was like on with like Mark Henry's like in the room like this, and I was like, what the hell?
Cool.
Like, that's like like true like imposter syndrome. Like how am I in how am I here with Mark Henry? But yeah. So yeah, but I mean I'm always open to do podcasts. I think they're a lot of fun. I do my own comedy podcast too.
Nice.
So we do that weekly still, even though I'm not really doing stand up anymore, but yeah.
What's that one called?
That's called OMG So Random Hee Hee.
That's a great name. I love that. Cool name. That's a great name.
Definitely go check that out, because that's
definitely check that out. That sounds like a lot of fun.
I did notice that your website has one episode of a WrestleMap podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did one episode of a podcast where I kind of like tried to go all around the world and talk about, you know, what's going on in those places at that time. I wanted to do like, you know, current events and stuff like that, current shows, you know, share some results, some news. It was pretty tough though, and the time that I was able to do the one episode, I was like recovering from surgery at the time, so I was like, I didn't have much else I could do, and I was like, this could be a good time for this. Other than that, I've been trying to do more like video articles of like the things that I'll post on the website. I'll also put up on YouTube and then add them to like the video section on the website too. And that's kind of like my way now of doing a little bit of a podcast, I guess, where it's like mostly just focusing on that one story or that one subject and putting out a little something on that.
And is it true that you've also done stuff for Pro Wrestling Illustrated as well?
Yeah, I have. I wrote a little bit for them. I've helped out with like the Champions roll call the last couple years to help them get some info on like champions in Africa, especially. And then I contributed this year they did like top prospects in wrestling.
Oh, nice.
For the year. And I was kind of assigned like South America, Southeast Asia, Central America, Africa, like pretty much everywhere in the world that wasn't like Japan, Mexico, and the US. And I think I did a profile on like 8 wrestlers for that. So that was really cool. That was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's crazy how they have you, you know, finding all these places everywhere but like the US. Like they're like, you're the guy that we need for all the countries. This is like we need,
exactly,
we need this guy. We need this guy.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to have like the niche, I guess.
Right.
That is, I think, another thing though that can maybe be off-putting to some people, right? So it's like a lot of wrestling fans, they probably want to read and watch, you know, wrestling they know, or you know, that kind of thing. So like I feel at times like I'm a niche within the niche, where it's like. You know, only maybe a certain percentage of wrestling fans might want to know about, there's wrestling in, you know, Guatemala or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. So that I think that sometimes can be maybe a little bit of a hindrance, I guess, to keep me from like maybe expanding my audience. But at the same time, I'm happy with it because I like, you know, covering that stuff. So
Yeah.
So is there anything, or well, really anywhere, that you've been very surprised that you found professional wrestling? Like, it seems to me there's, like, for example, in looking at your Twitter today, there's a poster for Leo Rush wrestling in Transylvania.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
there's
crazy
just,
too.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Crazy.
it's
Yeah.
mind blowing to think about sometimes. But
Yeah.
yeah, is there anything you were really like, anything that really kind of surprised you or kind of took you off guard, maybe a little bit that you didn't think?
The one that always comes to mind when I get a question like this is Nepal. And it's not necessarily just that there's wrestling in Nepal, but it's more about like how crazy they are for wrestling there.
Oh, yeah?
Like there is like I would say 2, maybe 3 or 4 promotions, solid promotions there, and they hold a majority of their events like outside, but
okay.
a lot of the time, at least the one promotion, they seem to go to like the really like beautiful like scenic parts of Nepal. Like they'll wrestle on top of like a mountain.
Oh, wow.
And, like, they'll be surrounded by like mountain ranges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they'll still get a turnout of like 5,000 people.
Jeez.
And like I have like a contact
That's
there,
insane.
and I've talked to her about like about their crowds, and she's told me some of the events have been like you have to walk like 1.5 miles on foot. That's the only way you can get here, and they're still getting like thousands of people coming out. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So that's always like a fun one. I actually did like a piece on the website and on YouTube about like Nepal and like the current scene and some of the history, and like putting that together was like one of my more favorite things that I've done. So that it definitely is interesting for sure.
What were some of the places that you did commentary and ring announcing for?
I did ring announcing for a Buffalo. I'm in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
So I did ring announcing for a local indie that's no longer around. I only did one show. They're called Old School Pro Wrestling. They're no longer around. They kind of like a lot of the guys that were in that went on to do Nickel City Wrestling,
Gotcha.
which I did like play-by-play at their one event. I thought it was maybe gonna become a more permanent thing because they reached out and asked me, but I don't know. I don't really know what happened. It was an okay experience, I'll say.
Right.
There was some stuff that we could have done better for sure, but
yeah.
It was fun though. It's still like a great experience, like stuff I've always wanted to do.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
Very cool. So thinking about when you first started this and thinking about, what you had in mind for, what all this was eventually going to be. Do you feel like you've accomplished your goal? Do you feel like maybe your goals for this over time have maybe changed or evolved? And if so, what do you think your kind of current goals are for what you're doing?
I think that the goals have evolved for sure. I think at a time I put a lot of pressure on myself to like make it some kind of like, and like this would still be awesome if it happened, but I don't think I'm as driven by it anymore. Like if this could be my job, like if this could somehow turn into something where like this is all I do, that would be awesome. And I think I put a lot of stress on myself in the past at times where it was like, all right, I got to pump out like daily news articles. I got to do this. I got to do that.
Right.
And then it got to the point where it's like, this isn't really fun.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think some of the goals have changed for sure. I think I'm still happy with it. I'm anytime I hear like that anyone's even interested in it, it's like really cool.
Right.
Like that's that to me, like that's like the cool thing now. Or like I always wanted to like have, I guess, people within the industry think of this as like a cool tool, like just the map alone. And I've gotten to the point where I've heard from a lot of wrestlers around the world that like think that this is cool and really helpful. And like that alone, I think like, okay, then it's worth it, because that's kind of what I had in mind, when I started, that this could be helpful and could help people wrestle around the world and things like that. And I think that it has kind of done that. So
yeah, not even that, but it could also help us help us podcasters over here find new, promotions to
Absolutely.
reach out to, new places
sure.
to maybe discover that we didn't know before, that we can, either find out what their promotion's about, find out where they are, it's cool that you
Definitely.
have all this information at hand, at the ready, that's constantly evolving as well, because it's constantly changing.
Right.
It's something that years ago we wouldn't have access to because we only had a few promotions that we knew about, but now they're literally everywhere.
Everywhere. Yep.
Scattered.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just the whole idea of it and the thought of it. We've been kind of looking internationally lately as well, and a lot of it comes from places like you that have discovered things we don't even know about. I mean, we were just talking with some people in Finland.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
You just don't know until you know. And for the average person to go out there and try and find something on their own like that, to be able to have a place that they can go and just have things like Sean said at your fingertips. It's really an invaluable tool. It reminds me, and this is a really bad example because they're kind of the same, but not really. This reminds me of the old PWI wrestling almanacs that you would buy every year.
Yeah,
I love those.
And those are great.
I wish they would bring those back. Like
I know.
I don't even.
Those
I
are
don't
so
even care if
good.
there's the internet. Like
So
I love
good.
having that in my hand.
I was kind of thinking about that the other day, and I was like, maybe that kind of sparked some of this interest in me to kind of compile that. Maybe because I loved those things. Like I would carry them around with me. Like
oh, absolutely.
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I still have some around the house somewhere because
I wish I did.
You don't get rid of it. Like it's crazy.
Yeah,
But you look at we are wrestling fans, and so this has always been like a hobby to us until some of us start doing things like podcasts or compiling wrestling maps for the world. But again, it's still a hobby. But then we look at things like WrestleMap or the PWI almanacs, and you think of these things as like resources. It's like back in the day when kids would go to the library to look at world encyclopedias.
Yeah.
This is the same thing. It's got that resource value to it.
Yeah,
I do.
Absolutely.
I do have an idea kind of based off of that I would love to try one day.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do like a pro wrestling atlas. Is
nice.
Like a goal that I have where it's like. But I think I have a lot more research I'd have to do first. But I would like to do like each country, try and touch a little bit on what's going on there and maybe some history and that kind of thing. Because I mean, I don't think that's been done. There's been like encyclopedias, almanacs, and so I don't know. I think an atlas could be cool.
Could we ever see a WrestleMap's almanac one day?
Ooh.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I guess I can't say no, but yeah. I think there would be a lot of work. There is someone that I hear from him every once in a while, and he told me that he wanted to help me compile a list of like all the title belts in the world.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So I think they're still working on it. They recently checked in with me and was like, "Oh, I'm on this part." I was like, "Oh, sweet. I'm happy to hear you're still working on this." So I think they would want to share that on the WrestleMap website. So if we get to that point, I think that would hopefully end up there, but I don't know when. So but yeah, that could be cool. So
I think a lot of people are drawn to this kind of thing because, again, it's you look at the different places, and just to use an example, you were speaking about Nepal, and you look at the things that happen there, and number one, it shows that professional wrestling transcends cultures. It transcends anything in this world. Pro wrestling transcends that, and it's this kind of very visceral thing that people are drawn to. But it's interesting to see how that happens in different parts of the world, because we're very lucky here in the US to know a lot of the history of professional wrestling in the US, you know,
Yeah.
from the early days of like the Carnies to the territories to, you know, the what built the modern day era.
Right.
But to look at another culture and say, how do 5,000 people trek a mile and a half on foot to get to a wrestling show in the middle of the mountains?
Right.
Right.
Where does that all come from? So the history of it, I think, is very interesting to a lot of people. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of fans are kind of we're conditioned to be drawn to the history of wrestling because it's so important here in the US. But to see that in other cultures, I think something like WrestleMap draws that out of people and sort of pulls people into it.
Right. There was a show I think Vice did, and I think it was just called Wrestlers.
Yeah.
And they were a really cool example of them trying to show you that, hey, there's wrestling literally everywhere. And they did like something on Deathmatch. They did something about voodoo wrestling, which I didn't even know existed until I watched that show. Like, it's crazy. Like, how much... It's crazier to me to think about what different countries think wrestling actually is.
Yeah.
Versus this, like, us in the States. Because some shows don't even have rings. Some only have pads. Some only have...
Right.
Some just have ring ropes. Like, everyone has their own interpretation of what wrestling is. And that, to me, is just fascinating. And it's cool that we have someone like you that's gathering all this information for us to see and exactly where all of this is happening. That's really cool.
I really liked that Vice show, by the way. And that was kind of like I think a little inspiration for me, too.
Yeah.
For some of the stuff I did. And like you mentioned, before I saw the like the stuff on voodoo wrestling, I didn't know much about Congolese wrestling or that the voodoo stuff existed or whatever. And now like that's some of my favorite stuff to like watch and cover. Like I have friends there. I've done some like sponsored some events there, like have you know video from the events on our website. And
awesome.
So it's like I that's always like Congolese wrestling is like, especially like that was kind of my starting point with it too, and it's kind of like my interest in it has grown. Like actually the call that I was getting was from, I'm working on this is going to take me a long time, but I'm trying to put together like an actual history of Congolese wrestling.
Oh, cool.
So I've been I've been reaching out to a lot of people, and one of the calls I was getting was actually from like one of the first wrestlers, like family members that I've reached out to recently, and I'm trying to get some stuff from them to see, you know, what I can uncover. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll get me some good stuff, but it's doing like the history on the Congo has been really tough just because like there isn't as much of a I guess like formal record keeping. So even like the internet is like not as extensive as we would have here. Even like the newspapers, I mean, you can't find them online, and like they may not have been as many of them back then, and so there's been a lot of like, you know, going back and forth, talking to people has been a lot of what I've been trying to do, but you do get some conflicting stuff, so it's kind of you got to try to pick like what sounds the most reasonable and how can I share these both sides. So
and it's interesting when we look at, you know, wrestling kind of across the globe, you know, because we're looking at it from a very sort of independent standpoint, but you've got, you know, global companies like WWE and TKO are recognizing that there is wrestling out there. When you look at, you know, some of the previous iterations of NXT and the ideas moving forward about different, you know, international NXTs, and even just WWE going to international places that they've never gone before. There's like it's almost like this groundswell of all of this indie wrestling is really opening up the eyes of people in major promotions who are seeing like, hey, you know, we have looked at, say, the US and like the UK as our major markets at this point, but wrestling, there's wrestling to be had all over the world, and there's wrestling fans to entertain all over the world. It's you know, it's interesting to see how they're starting to wake up and see that as well.
And WWE, before the sale and all that, they launched this program that was supposed to be like their first, like their first African superstar.
Yeah.
Where they were gonna hold like open tryouts in Nigeria.
Oh wow.
And they held this event to like launch the campaign. And then through Super Sport, which is like a sports channel over there that like, that's who like has the WWE programming rights. They were like working with WWE and hosting this program, and people were supposed to send over like these, video submissions to try and get considered for like this first tryout that's supposed to happen in Lagos. And at this point now, it's been like a year and a half since they launched it. They've never announced like tryouts, but I like through some of my connections, I have like a lot of people that have reached out to me like in Nigeria, like, hey, do you have anything on this? Like, can you let me know like what's going on? And I'm just like, sorry, I don't know. Like once the sale happened, I think they maybe just dropped it. So that's I guess maybe the downside of that is maybe the not following through, because I know there was a lot of. And there was even some talk like, oh, is this going to be NXT Africa or something?
Well,
Sure.
Remember before they shut down NXT UK that there was rumblings that Triple H had a plan to get NXT Japan, NXT UK. They were going to have NXT like all over the world.
Right.
And then obviously they merged UK with NXT, and that kind of got shut down. But there were ideas in place to go global with NXT and just kind of go everywhere and kind of showcase this talent from all over the world.
You even look at some of the things they did with the Cruiserweight Classic and even some of the competitors in like the Mae Young Classic. They brought in a lot of that high caliber international talent. So I mean anything's possible. We don't know. It's again a lot of changes happening right now. So there's definitely anything's on the table, but I find it hard to believe that if they start hearing about international markets where the wrestling is really taking off and people are really hot behind it, I find it hard to believe that they won't end up there eventually.
I'm sure they will, because WWE wants to be this global phenomenon, and obviously there are some companies that are trying to get in the way, but at the end of the day they still want to be the global phenomenon. So what better way to go to actually go global?
I think there is one small issue with some of these markets though, where they're drawing like huge crowds, like Nepal and like the Congo, for example. A lot of those events aren't charging.
Oh,
so
really?
Like fans are coming out in big numbers, but it's a free show. So like to WWE at this point, like maybe they see it, but they're like, I don't know that we can do much here yet. So.
Right. And you also got to think about, like, for instance, when Saudi Arabia initially got the signed the contract to do this 10-year deal with WWE, their first Saudi Arabia show, it kind of gives you an idea of what Saudi knows about wrestling, because they were asking for wrestlers who were no longer alive. They were like, They were like, we want Warrior, we want Yokozuna, and they're like, they're not alive to put on the show.
not making the trip.
We can't do that.
We could bring them, but man, I don't think you want to see them.
I don't think you want to see them.
Who? That's a real casket match.
Because I'm pretty sure there was 2 separate years where they asked for names, and they're like, we can't give you them. Why? Because they're no longer here. We can't. Sorry. Our bad.
So, all right. So where does WrestleMap go from here? Is it just bigger, better, more coverage? Is that the plan?
I hope so. Forward? I hope so. I've really wanted to grow like video coverage on top of like the map stuff and some of the news stuff. So that's something I'm trying to expand on. Bring in some footage from around the world that we can host, and maybe we've done some exclusive events. So sometimes that stuff I would like to keep doing as long as like the money is right, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, I hope it's just bigger and better. I mean,
Right.
I think over like the longer you're around, the more people kind of start to notice. So, hopefully, I'm starting to kind of get to that point with the site where it's harder to not know about it. Maybe I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, one final question before we wrap things up here, and I think this would be a good way to end the show going forward. So what does wrestling mean to you, and what is its impact on your life?
Ooh.
I feel like it's like the one thing that I know is like I can if I don't know if I'm having a bad day or I'm bored or even if I'm having a good day or whatever, it's like the one thing that like if I want to put on a wrestling show or if I want to, you know, start doing some research or creating something, if it's wrestling wise, like it's gonna kind of like bring me around to like, you know, a better mood or like, you know, so it's kind of like, I don't know, I guess it's like that one thing, that one, I guess, hobby that like to me is like, I know it's like the one that's gonna make me feel good for the most part. Like
It's an escape.
exactly.
Basically,
Yeah.
it's an
Yeah.
escape from reality. You give yourself 2 hours to watch a show that sometimes makes absolutely no sense, but we love it. And
Right.
you know, like, but we love it because it's that escape from our own reality that we can just dive into and just enjoy, and have that like moment of peace, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Well, guys, you have been listening to Wrestling with Life. We have been
Indeed.
talking to Bryan Anderson, the founder of WrestleMap. We've had the social media tag running across the bottom at WrestleMap. You can find them on socials. You can find their YouTube channel. And of course, you know, please visit WrestleMap.com.
Yes.
Bryan, anything else you'd like to plug while you're here?
So I guess there's going to be some stuff coming kind of soon. Like there will be an event from Pro Wrestling Africa that's going to end up on our website and YouTube soon. I already have, you know, all the footage. I'm just working on putting everything together.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then there's going to be some more stuff from the Congo coming soon too. That'll be exclusive to our site. And yeah, just, you know, keep an eye out for more news, more videos, more, you know, I guess follow us on social media, you know, Twitter and Instagram is, and Facebook too is where I try to share more like modern ongoings, I guess, current day, like upcoming events and all that. So if you're interested in checking out, you know, what's going on in, you know, South America or Asia, that kind of stuff, you know, check out WrestleMap really anywhere on social media.
Yeah. Check out the WrestleMap if you want to know where wrestling is anywhere in the world.
Sure.
Anywhere.
Yeah, well, definitely keep us in the loop as to what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, we love to let people know all of the great things you guys are doing over at WrestleMaps, and it's been a great interview. We thank you for coming and chatting with us today a little bit about WrestleMaps.
Yeah, thank you a
lot.
lot.
If you want to hang back, we'll talk to you in a few minutes. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I had a blast.
All right, Sean.
All right.
That was a very cool show.
That was insightful.
I was very excited to learn about
insightful.
WrestleMaps because when I saw what they were doing, I was like, this is such a cool idea. Like,
it really is a cool idea. Like the fact that now we have a site where we can find any wrestling anywhere in the world.
And you think about wrestling in your own little bubble, but you never think about it outside of that
Everywhere.
and what's going on in the rest of the world. And I keep going back to that story he told about Nepal because it's crazy, inspiring to me. It makes me want to know about what else is going on in the world as far as wrestling goes. And the great thing about it is I have a place to do that.
Like, think about it. Would you walk an hour and a half to go to a wrestling show? Like would you?
Oddly enough, you're asking the wrong person because I probably would.
You would.
But still, I might. Okay. You know, it's definitely not out of the question. But
I don't know if I could do it. I would probably be tired halfway in and give up. Like, I'm done. I tried.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for
Thank you so
tuning
much.
in today. We appreciate you for checking us out. This is Wrestling with Life. Again, head over to our Patreon if you want to get that 5-day early access and some other
Yes.
cool stuff we got for you.
Dude.
So definitely head over to our Patreon and check that out. Follow us on socials at Opinion City Pod. That'll get you everything we're doing. Follow at Ben Frank Connect. We have links in our description. Follow all that stuff so you
Why
never
don't we
miss
tell them,
this.
our esteemed people, audience, what's the 3 easy steps, Ralph?
Oh,
Give them
there
the 3
are
easy
3
steps.
easy steps.
There are 3 easy steps.
Step number 1, hit that thumbs up button so we know that you enjoy what we are doing here at Wrestling with Life. Number 2, smash that subscribe. Smash it. Like, listen, listen, get up on the top rope, give it a 450 splash.
Right.
Just smash that subscribe button so you never miss anything we're doing. And number 3, please share. Hit that share button. Share us with your friends, your family. Share us with people in Transylvania. If you know anyone in Nepal,
anybody,
just anybody anywhere in the world, please share us with them. And if you really want to show us some support, what else can you do?
Buy some merch. Oh, yeah, buy some merch.
Yes, we've got merch. So please, again, links in the description. So go grab some merch. We got some great WrestleMania stuff coming up.
You know it.
And then we've already talked about following our socials.
Yep, already got that
very
part.
Important to get everything. And then last but not least, guys, follow and support all of our guests. It's
follow
very
the
important.
Guests.
Show
them some love.
These people need love just like we do because they're out there day in and day out, and they are giving you the quality content that you need. They're showing you professional wrestling from all over the world. So please, you saw the links running across the bottom of the screen. So please support our good friend Bryan over at WrestleMap.
Do that.
Yes. So Sean, with that, another great episode, and we will see you on the next episode of Wrestling with Life.
Bid you adieu.
Hey, this is ABJ of the ABJ Podcast, and you're listening to the Opinion City Wrestling with Live series exclusively on Patreon. Enjoy!
Thanks for watching this presentation. Like, share, and subscribe for more.